This is Tim.
This is Jonathan.
Welcome back to The Average, where we don't just watch movies, we pick them apart.
Not literally, unless we're talking about today's movie, where people get blasted, zapped, and straight up exploded. Well, at least their heads.
That's right, we're headed back to the 80s for a film that asks, what if shopping malls had murder bots?
And what if those murder bots were somehow both terrifying and kind of adorable?
It's Chopping Mall, the 1986 cult classic that proves security upgrades can sometimes be too effective.
And joining us to break it all down is Travis Ayers, producer of Cyst, Miracle Valley, Infrared, Forbidden Sky, and The Christmas Tapes.
Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. Thank you for that fantastic introduction. And yeah, so my name's Travis Ayers, as those guys said. And I'm the one that, before I get into my own introduction, I'm the one that brought this movie to these guys because I am obsessed with this movie. I think Chopping Mall, there are a lot of redeeming qualities about it. There are some non-so-redeeming qualities about it, but that's what makes it so wonderful. So I'm excited to talk about it, and I thank you guys again for being able to chat about it. It's going to be exciting. So, yes, my name, I grew up in Ohio. Not a lot of outlets for film and media there, so I moved to Pennsylvania, where I went to George Romero's School of Filmmaking, which was also attached to Tom Savini's School of Special Effects and Makeup. So
that is awesome.
I mean, nice. Constantly surrounded by horror. I can't even think of like a day that I didn't see, fake blood on the floor. Like it was everywhere, no matter what was going on. So it was a lot of fun. I think one of the coolest things was it wasn't, one of those film schools where like you're constantly in a classroom looking at books, watching slides, watching, classics constantly. You're actually like setting things up, you're shooting, you're on sets, you're working 8-hour days, like just cool stuff. And like one thing that like popped into mind recently that I kind of wanted to mention too real quick is my wife and I were watching Joe Bob Briggs, which I gotta show some love there. The guy got me into loving movies again. I always struggle with watching movies sometimes, and I watch movies because he makes it more entertaining with the facts in between. But we were watching the recent one with Opera, Dario Argento's Opera, and there's an actress in it, Coralina Cataldi, and I was like, holy shit, like I did a movie with her in film school, and it was a short film. And it just like kind of having those like memories, it's just like, I don't know, very like humble that like even little things like that. Like I was, 21, 22, and I'm working with this amazing Italian actress who was in all these really cool Italian horror films. So, I got a lot of fun experience early on. I also learned a lot. I think this is where a lot of my appreciation, I think, comes from for things like Chopping Mall. I feel like a lot of the individuals that were around me as far as teachers and instructors go they were all with the independent, low budget film mentality. So my main instructor, he was the producer on Surf Nazis Must Die. My sound teacher did the score for Miami Connection. So like we're, and work obviously like George Romero, Tom Savini, those guys too. So like everything with those as well. But I feel like, we're still being taught about, the multi-million-dollar movies, but we're also learning how to like cut corners and save money here and save money there. And I was always, that was to this day is still stuck with me. Like we're getting ready to jump into another production pretty soon. And I'm to this day still using those little things. So, I had, needless to say, I had a really good time at film school. It was a lot of fun. And from there, I worked at a small art house theater in Pittsburgh where I made a lot of fun connections. Worked with George Hardy from Troll 2, the dad from Troll 2. That was
Oh,
my
wow.
first big connection. He actually is the one that put me in touch with the group that I work with today, a director named Tyler Russell, who directed Cyst. And then shortly after I met George Hardy, who else would I have to meet? Greg Sestero from The Room, the other bad movie. So started booking shows for him around the country at different theaters. So started working with that, and then we built a relationship. And then now it's me and him. We have our own little company with Sestero Pictures. We're going to be doing a movie called Forbidden Sky this summer. So
Did you do a promo? Did you share something from that today?
So today is actually Alien Abduction Day, which again, every day is something nowadays. Like it's wild to me how like you can literally look something up and it's like, oh, today's like coffee table day. I mean, it's like it's so wild. Just like I remember being a teen and just like to me like Boxing Day was like, who thought of it? Like, why is Boxing Day a thing? But yeah, today is actually Alien Abduction Day. So,
nice.
Yeah, I woke up to that and I was like, Greg knows this, but I don't. So that's fascinating and also really cool that Greg knows this and I don't. So yeah, Forbidden Sky, but it's just like, I don't know. It's really cool how life works. And again, more like just how the hell did I get this? Because I don't want to say I don't deserve it, but it's also just like, I go from working at a movie theater, doing a lot of fun things and fun screenings, to linking up with George Hardy, the dad from Troll 2, but then also linking up with, Greg Sestero from The Room. And literally 1 year from the date is when I went and saw The Disaster Artist in theaters. So like, it's just wild how things come full circle. And that's kind of like what led me to every movie that you just listed off. Are through those two individuals. So it started with George Hardy, then led to Greg, Tyler Russell, and then last but not least, and then we can start talking about Chopping Mall. I'm a talker. I'm sorry, guys.
That's all right.
I do overshare and I do overtalk. I do want to talk about these Killbots.
I'm fascinated. So
you got passion for what you got going on, and that's okay. We're down with that.
Hey, I appreciate you saying that because I do. I love what I do. And then lastly, you mentioned infrared and the Christmas tape. So during COVID, I get an email out of the blue, and so I represent two people as like a talent agent, talent manager. George Hardy, one of them, and CM Talkington, who is the director of a movie called Love in a 45, which is something I want to bring up later in the cast. So that's kind of a little Pavlov's gun. Is that the? I think that's the term. I hope I didn't mess that up because
is it cat?
Pavlov's dog, gun, dog.
I know there's Pavlov's dog. I don't know about a gun.
I'm trying to think of the gun one. There's one in
like
film
Old Yeller involved in that? I don't know.
I'm like, I feel like a terrible film student now because there's one that's Chekhov's gun. Something. There's like a thing in film where they say like if you show a gun early on in the movie, it has to be used later in the film. Like that's the whole game. Like, and it has some name. So
that thing,
I'm a horrible film student right now. Anyways,
it's Chekhov's gun. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, bless you. Yes. So that kind of comes into play with what we're going to talk about later that involves Chopping Mall. But anyways, yeah. So I represent George Hardy, CM Talkington, who's the director of Love in a 45. But during COVID, I got an email from a gentleman named Rob Livings, who is an instructor at a film school in Sacramento called Futures Explored, which is for adults with varying disabilities. So whether it's intellectual, Down syndrome, a lot of it primarily is students with autism. And all age ranges, so as young as 18 all the way up into, early 50s. And because they were on, due to COVID, they were all doing online courses. So he had reached out and said, "Hey, like, would you and George want to do a Q&A and talk about your experiences on Cyst?" We just showed the students and they all loved it. So it would be a lot of fun. So yeah, we did a Q&A. It was a blast. Like, it was probably the most fun I've ever had, just doing a Q&A with people, because like everyone was so passionate about it, and they had like realistic like questions that were like stuff I never even thought about. So it made me even think about things I like did on the film. I'm like, I should have done that. So yeah, that was how that connection was built. And then like a month later, I reached back out to Rob and was like, "Hey, I really, really enjoyed that. I have never taught before, but I would love to teach. Do you think there would ever be an opening for me to teach?" And he's like, "Yeah, like we definitely need someone to teach." So I started teaching producing and marketing classes, and then that led to special effects and makeup. I taught a found footage class. I taught a horror class, and I still work with them to this day. I do adjunct teaching, so sometimes I teach twice a week, sometimes I teach full weeks. But yeah, so, and they're Rob and Randy both work with Futures Explored. So that's kind of how that connection goes there too. So sorry guys, there's a lot of Tarantino connection, like let's connect the dots here, but everyone I work with, we're all tied in together. And I just want to say I work with some great people. They're all really, really good people. So I found myself a good group, but yeah, so that kind of puts the bow on everything. Is the Futures Explored tie-in?
All right, cool.
That is awesome.
I can
that
dig
is
it, man.
awesome. So
yeah.
before we go too far, I'm curious. What does your involvement? So you've talked about your teaching and your connections. What is your involvement if you're attached as producer to a film? What does your involvement with that film look like?
So this is an ongoing joke with me and my wife. She's like, "What exactly does a producer do?" I'm like, "I honestly don't know. I wish I could tell
results.
you." Yeah, and we were just
The internet
watching
is full of theories.
We're literally watching or listening to something, and that was like the person's answer, and it was like, "What does a producer do?" And they're like, "I don't know."
Whatever he wants.
Answer phone calls, send emails. No, honestly, so I think the best way of putting it, because I'm literally doing it as we speak. So right now, Tyler Russell, the director of Cyst, we are working on a found footage project that takes place in Texas. It kind of revolves around a first wedding dress. And essentially what we're doing is, so I guess like there's a lot more to it as far as like the pre-production part goes, but I'll kind of like fast forward a bit. So because that's kind of where we are now as far as like the production goes, we've gotten our budget. So obviously there's a lot of stuff that would come before, getting your budget, and that sometimes is the hardest part, is like selling your script, getting someone to invest in your idea. That's honestly can be the hardest part. So yeah, there are a lot of stuff that come before that, but we've gotten that secured. So like that's all in the past. But right now is basically just going over the script, having a rough script, figuring out who's going to play who. We look over like, okay, this is what, right now we're looking over where we can cut corners, because it's a found footage movie. You don't necessarily need everything you might need on, say, a film like Cyst, because you kind of want it. It's going to be like very close quarters. Like, yeah, you do need a DP, but at the same time, that DP is going to be your lead actor. So, there are certain roles that like will have to double up. So, and that also cuts position. So that is, in a way, from like a producer standpoint, good, because you're saving a lot of money on the budget. So like when that happens, like let's say, okay, we don't really need a wardrobe person because everyone's going to be wearing what they would normally wear. Or this was something I brought up on a phone call yesterday, was like, well, a lot of it takes place in the building itself. We don't really need hair and makeup to an extent, because, you know, if you're going to investigate a haunted place, like, you're not, you know, logistically, you're not going to get all dolled up to go, you know, into this dark, abandoned old church to find this dress. Like, you're just not going to do that. And
Right.
found footage fans, they take their stuff very, very seriously, and they'll point it out and they'll like find it. So like, it's, you know, it will happen. So that was one thing that we did yesterday, was basically just look at different roles that can be cut. And that was one of them. It's like, well, we don't need someone to do hair and makeup because there's not going to be a need for it on this particular film. So a lot of it is just doing stuff like that. Once all of that's done, like next week, I'm probably going to start talking to the location. So making sure that's all locked down. We will set up an LLC, so we have the bank account ready, so everyone can get paid. Making sure we have insurance, because the location itself is not the most safest location, and we do want to play it safe. We made the joke. Well, I made the joke because I'm just like, let's save as much money as possible. And he's like, get the LLC, and he's like, you got to get the insurance. I'm like, you don't need insurance on this thing. And he's like, who are you, Werner Herzog? I'm like, I'm just kidding. I was like, we're getting insurance on this one, because like that would be absurd. But yeah, no, it's literally just, a lot of it's just managing the money and figuring out like, okay, here's how we can save money, but making sure the money that you're saving is going to a department that's going to benefit the movie. So like, for example, like, let's say you're taking away a department, put that money towards, you know, the sound designer, because especially for like a horror film, you know, one of the most important things is going to be the sound design. So like, the sound design should be, you know, they should be getting what they deserve. Or say like, and this is something that I always tell my students, it's really important, and it's just because I'm like, have like a marketing background, is you want to have a decent amount of money saved nowadays for a marketing budget. And that, you know, includes a poster, entry fees for film festivals, social media marketing. So putting money into like ads and stuff. And like, a lot of people don't even think about that. And at least on the independent level, I don't think a lot of people think about that. Like the major players, they have plans years out. I mean, they're already thinking about that. But a lot of the independent filmmakers, like, they don't think about that until their movie's already out. They've already paid their distributor, and they're like, well, I don't have any money left to do any marketing. So that's really kind of like what a producer does prior, along with a ton of different, like I said, a lot of different phone calls, a lot of emails.
All right, we sidetracked you there, but I loved hearing what you had to say. I was super fascinated. You're by far the only professional we've had on the show so far. So we've had Ivy Poland, but she's an author. She's a horror author. So you're the first one connected to the film industry. That is super exciting, though.
Oh no, I appreciate that. And yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of fun. And really, like, the off the set stuff isn't, you know, I might say it out loud, and, you know, you might hear it and be like, oh, it doesn't sound like much fun. But really, some of the at home stuff is actually a lot of fun. And then, yeah, when you're on set, I mean, as far as like, obviously there's different types of producers, but, you know, you got UPMs, associates. I feel like my role is typically, you know, with the director. I'm always with the crew and the talent, just making sure they're always happy. Just very like personable. So I think that's always been my approach as a producer. You put out a lot of fires, hopefully not literally, but figuratively. Because that's one thing too you'll see is just like it's really just like making sure everyone's happy. Because it's it's like high school sometimes. It's if one person gets unhappy, that can spread really quickly, and on a film set everyone gets worn out pretty quickly, so like one bad thing can lead to a bunch. And yeah, like that's kind of what you do. And then also you just make sure that everything runs smoothly. Obviously you work with the assistant director and just make sure that like no one's going over time. There's not more shots than that need to be. If you're working with like union members, you're not going over their time constraints because then you get fined. And like it's just really just like keeping an eye on everything, and making sure everyone's happy. Making sure you don't go over budget, which can happen very quickly too. Yeah, it is a lot of fun. I think too the most rewarding part is obviously when the movie comes out, and you're like, oh, okay, this is why I did this, because you finish filming and you're just like, oh God, why did I do this? But then you watch it and you're like, okay, that's why I did it. It was worth it.
I think that all sounds awesome.
Heck
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a blast.
Okay, then. Well, then, back to it, I guess. So, as we were saying, we're going to be talking about killer robots, 80s cheese, and the art of making a damn good B movie.
Yeah. So what's bringing us all together? Already said it. Chopping Mall. We're here to talk about Chopping Mall. I first noticed it. Travis was sharing about his love on social media, and I hopped in there and I was like, man, this is one of my favorite 80s. It's not really a slasher, pseudo slasher, whatever you want to call it. It borrows a lot of elements, but it's one of my favorites. I love this film.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I think this is the general consensus of this film is everyone hates that the poster is so, misleading. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like that's a marketing technique. I mean, I've watched so many movies where, I'm like, that person is on the cover, but it's not actually in the movie. I know the Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3, the woman that's on the cover of those movies, she's not in them. I mean, again, it's there. That might be a lame reference, but like, still, I don't think that's really the problem with this movie. I love the poster. It's one of the best movie posters of all time.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I love Chopping Mall, and I think we're going to dive pretty deep into it. But one of the biggest reasons that I love it, and it's something that I put in my review, is from like a producing standpoint, they took everything they had with, I think it was like an $800,000 budget, which really isn't a lot, because it all goes so fast, especially with like them with the mall rental, special effects, paying people, stuff like that. They took what they had, and they made use of what they had. I mean, they filmed nights at a mall and they made it look incredibly cool. They got a really good cast, most of which ended up doing more stuff that ended up being pretty notable. But it just, I don't know. To me, when you make a movie, you want to make it something that you can always go back to and rewatch and enjoy, whether it's by yourself or with a group of friends. Because, there's a lot of movies that I love that I might have watched, whether it's in film school or, I regard as like one of the best movies of all time. But a lot of those movies, I can't go rewatch and enjoy like I can, say, a Chopping Mall. Like,
yeah. Yep.
I think that's how people should. I'm not going to because I'm not this master filmmaker, but I've always kind of had that motto where like you should make a movie not to be this masterpiece, but you should make something that's like, 10 years from now, like someone can like find and watch it and then rewatch it. It's all about rewatchability, whether it's good or bad. So that's my love for chopping mall.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying with the title, though, you know, you hear Chopping Mall and you think it's like a slasher flick, but, you know, is it like wielding maniac in a food court? But no, it's just like a full blown techno horror with killer security robots on the loose. And it's like, oh, what?
Yeah. So released in 1986, this little gem was directed by Jim Wynorski and produced by Julie Corman. Yes, from that Corman family. It stars Kelly Maroney, Tony O'Dell, Russell Todd, and Barbara Crampton. Basically, if you were making a low-budget horror movie in the 80s and didn't cast Barbara Crampton, did you actually make a horror movie in the 80s?
Absolutely not. So the setup, a shopping mall installs a state-of-the-art security system, 3 high-tech robots programmed to keep criminals at bay. But because this is an 80s horror film, a lightning storm fries our circuits, turning them from mall cops into full-on murder machines.
And naturally, there just happens to be a group of teenagers partying in a furniture store after hours. Because why wouldn't you? Drinking, hooking up, and living your best Reagan-era lives until the Killbots show up and start reducing the guest list.
And speaking of the 80s, this movie leans hard into the era's obsession with malls, consumerism, and technology. Some folks even compare it to Dawn of the Dead, only instead of zombies mindlessly consuming, you've got robots enforcing capitalist discipline in the bloodiest way possible.
That's right. Film scholars have dug deep into this one, calling it a satirical take on Reagan-era excess. But let's be real, the reason Chopping Mall endures is because it is fun. It's got cheesy one-liners, insane laser kills, exploding heads, and an unrelenting pace.
Yep. And of course, it's got the iconic line, "Have a nice day."
All right. So let's get into this, talking about the story plot breakdown, what we think of that. Travis, as our guest, do you want to lead the way, or do you want to sandwich between us? Where do you want to fall on this?
I'll let one of you guys go, and then I'll sandwich.
I'll go first.
I don't mind being the sandwich.
All right.
I just want to say first, I was watching this last night, and I was like thinking like stupid, goofy thoughts. And when Travis, when you said that you grew up in Ohio, I was like, oh no, because I watched this. I was like, oh yeah, this seems like some shit that would go down at a mall in Ohio, you know? Like, oh,
you're not wrong, though. You're not wrong.
There's no Woodfield Mall in Schaumburg, but
if it were to happen, which will probably be a part of my like discussion at some point, maybe, it probably would be in that state. So you're not far off.
Oh man, that just totally tripped me up when you said you're from Ohio. I was like, oh my god, what I was thinking last night. Oh geez, man, awesome. But but we start with the story and the plot. You know, it's like we already said. You know, you got a bunch of like young adults. You know, probably like 18, 19, 20, or something like that, and they're partying after hours in a mall in one girl's daddy's furniture store. Everyone there seems to work at some shop in the mall. Security system comes online. And they've got this whole Johnny Five kind of thing, but with no comedy really, as not so much as that. You know, just their basic lines and then just murder, 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 which is still cool. But the way the characters go about trying to like defend themselves and defeat these robots and some of like the other weird little bits to it, it was fun. I thought it was cool. So there are certain parts of it I was just like, oh, that's so cheesy, but like, oh yeah. Ohio. Okay. But I don't know as far as like anything super unique. I mean, I don't remember hearing much about any kind of movies from that time that took place with like kind of a mall security kind of situation. So I thought that was pretty rad. It was interesting. And it was nice to see a bunch of like idiotic young people to get, you know, just totally hacked, slashed, zapped, and blasted. So it was good for me. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so the plot, I mean, Jonathan, you explained it the best, I feel like. There's really no other description for the plot. I think that, you know, and it kind of goes back to everyone's kind of complaint about this movie not actually being what they thought it would be. You know, everyone assumed that it would be a slasher film, not a film about robots. And I think, like, there's a movie called The Initiation, and then there's another one called Hide and Go Shriek, which both of those, take place in a mall, and they're serial killers. Um, I don't think either one of those work. I like The Initiation, but it's, and I might be reading too much into them, but then I'm also like, it's for, a serial killer to sneak into the mall and, chop off all these kids one by one. Yeah, obviously Jason Voorhees doesn't make a whole lot of sense either, but to me, it's like it makes more sense to have these security robots, patrolling this empty mall than to have someone, stay overnight and kill these teenagers. So again, we do have these mall slashers that are fine, but I still think that like Chopping Mall is a little different than those. But yeah, so we've got this, group of teens staying overnight at the mall, hanging out. I think every stereotypical character from every 80s movie, they're all there. And I think really there's not a whole lot of dynamic about a lot of the characters. Kelly Maroney is awesome. Night of the Comet. I love her in that. And yeah, Barbara Crampton, you mentioned her. I don't think, you can't really cast her and you can't make an 80s horror movie without having her in it. But really it's, I think the cast is overshadowed by the Killbots themselves, as weird as that kind of sounds, but like, they just look great. I think people will probably like watch it and be like, those look so cheesy, but it's like, well, okay, like this is an $800,000 movie. And I don't know, to me, like those look pretty cool for what the budget was. I would say they're, again, I think the Killbots really are like the lead of this thing. So, when it all comes boiling down to the overall plot of the story, yeah, it's incredibly goofy, but at the same time, I think it's a little more realistic than Slasher in the Mall, just because, especially like present day, malls obviously are kind of like on their way out. Some of them in bigger cities, like I know bigger cities, they're definitely they're still there and still really popular. But so this is kind of like this is where I dive a little too deep into Chopping Mall. So I do apologize in advance. But there's a lot of malls where there's crime, especially nowadays. And you always see like videos of like, theft and fights. And I'm just like thinking, I'm like, how, when will it come to when they, obviously they do have cops and guards at malls now, but like, when are we going to start seeing robots at malls? Like, and I say that sarcastically, but they got the Tesla robots and like they have all these, things that are already made that, even when I lived in Pittsburgh, like hearing stuff they were making at like the robotics center. I mean, the stuff's created. So I'm just still thinking like, is Chopping Mall that far fetched? I mean, as goofy as that sounds, like
not at all. Not at all. Irving Mall sounds like something that Irving Mall would have eventually.
I watched this movie.
I've been there.
And this time watching this movie, I was like, that robot AI is pretty advanced. Like that robot AI is there. And I'm like, how far are we from that? So I had the same question. You bring it up, but I had the same question watching this movie. It's not the first time I watched it, but this time I was like, yeah, it resonated a little bit.
It resonates a little too close, but again, so goofy to say out loud, but then you say it and you just like think about all the videos and stories you've read and you're just like, I mean, and also too, and this is the last thing I'll kind of like say about it is like, they would prefer to have like an AI robot, whatever you want to call it, in that situation versus a real person. Because one, you're saving a life, But two, like if you have like a robot in that situation, I just think like logistically, whoever's running that operation, whether it be a mall, like I could see them easily saying like, okay, we're gonna put this as our front runner. You know, we want to be the mall that has this technology protecting our mall. I don't know. I just feel like that's the thing. And then I think it's going to be such a huge trend on Twitter that people are just going to be sharing clips from Chopping Mall. And it's going to be
Yeah.
one of the best days ever. Like, because it's just going to, chopping Jim Wynorski's bank account is just going to, hopefully he's still alive to see it because he's made a lot of movies, some bad, some okay. But I hope he's alive to see it because yeah, his bank account will just skyrocket. So
I love the opening scene of this that you don't realize at first is like an advertisement for what these robots can do, and that is definitely the future that I'm picturing while you talk about that. That's going to be what's on Twitter, is these robots stopping that armed robbery.
Yep.
I love that this was actually originally titled Killbots. That was the original title of the film, but it didn't do great at the box office under Killbots. And that's when, like you said, it was a marketing decision. We're going to go Chopping Mall because Chopping Mall is catchy.
Slashing them prices.
Chopping Mall is awesome. That name is so good. The movie takes place at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, the real mall featured in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Commando. So some of the similar places there. But the story unfolds in a single night. It's really not a complex story at all. Like we've said, a bunch of kids staying after in dad's furniture store after a lockdown. The plan is to get out before the big steel doors close, but that goes wrong. And they're stuck with some killer robots overnight. It's a ton of fun. It didn't change the world. It won't change the world. It changed my world though. This was a blast. So I can't, I got to give it. So this is where we come in on the scores. I give it a 3. The story is good. It's unique. I can't think of another film quite like this with robots coming in to supposed to be our protectors, tearing down kids in the mall. You mentioned mall movies. I always think of Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, and how this is always better to me. This is the superior mall horror film for me. This is my go-to. It hits that 80s mall vibes and obsession that I want. I love the opening sequence of just people in the food court and skating through and going up I love it. It's a great film. But yeah, so story and plot, I give it a 3 out of 5. It's good. I can't really tell you it's great. There are parts of this movie are great. I'm not sure about the story, but yeah, I'm a 3.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I agree with you on that. I'm sitting at a 3 as well. It wasn't like anything that really blew my mind as far as the story goes, but it's still something that was enjoyable and entertaining. So 3's cool.
So I don't remember exactly what I put on the scorecard, but I'm going to say it's a 4 only because
that is what you put.
I just think that it is so original. And like, I feel like I just hear so many ideas on a regular basis, and I like have seen so many different movies, and this one is just so out there that it works. Like I don't know, I just think it's so obscure that it works, and I think that's why I love the story so much. It's like in no other universe would this idea work, but it works here. And if you really look at Wynorski's like his resume, not a lot of ones that work, but this one does work. And I just think, yeah, like a very, very original story. I know he did take some inspiration for some other movies from the 50s and 60s, but you know, I just think it's one of those movies that it will continue to have fandom because of its strangeness. Like it is so strange, and I think that is because of the story. Like, yeah, the Killbots, again, they're the characters, they're the shining stars, but I think the plot kind of will keep it around. It's like a roach. The plot will always make this movie live because they'll be like, someone will be talking, they'll be like, what's that movie about those killer robots in the mall? And it'll be Chopping Mall. So
Yeah, that is absolutely fair.
Cool.
The characters then.
Characters, man, they were goofy, they were fun, but they seemed very typical for the time, between having like your kind of shy, nerdy guy type, your guy who's kind of like the chill middleman of the guys, and then you've got your more alpha male kind of character there with Mike, played by John Turleski. The ladies were fun, and they still had like their kind of opposites to those guys as well, with the lady characters. You had a few bit characters on the side, some people who were somewhat familiar at the start when like they were doing the explanation of the robots and asking questions to the people who were presenting the whole thing for the mall security. But as far as like growth and like arc, there's not really much to speak of in that regard. Well, because almost everybody dies except for like two of the people. And it's great that they survived. They came out on top. What was it? Kelly Maroney playing Allison. She was like the hardcore lady. She was like the tough one out of like everybody, man. And
what's that line? My dad's a Marine. Was that?
Well, yeah. Well, she had one of the lines. She's like, "Daddy was a Marine." When she's like doing all the stuff and shooting, and popping, like she was pretty awesome. I liked her character a lot, and how she was like not your typical panic-stricken, female in a movie. She was more calm, collected, and was like ready to take on some challenges, and she was ready to survive.
Oh, she's pretty badass. Yeah,
she is. Like she was like one of my favorite characters because of how hardcore she was versus everybody else. The guys were cool. They were trying to be macho and like, save the ladies. But ultimately that kind of bit them in the ass. But whatever's whatever. That's just the story for you as far as the movie goes. But I liked them. I thought they were cool characters. They were each had their own weird little idiosyncrasies, because you got like random hookup couples, and then you got the couples like married. They were married, right? I think.
Yeah, that one's weird. Yeah.
Yes, that was kind of an offhand one, but the relationships and how they all interacted, I thought they were cool, and I had a good time with that. Would have liked to seen a little more from a couple of characters, but otherwise, not bad.
All right, so I am looking at my notes because I only have like very limited stuff on the characters. Because this movie is not. This movie, there's no characters. I mean, it's lacking in characters. Susie Slater delivers the line of the movie. I did have that in my notes here, and I think this is the most important part. She says, "I'm just not used to being chased around a mall by killer robots." And
that was so weird. I was like, "Why?"
And she delivers it so sarcastically, but it's not supposed to come across that way. Her delivery is it's very interesting. It's very dry, and you can't really like if I was to say it, it would be, I don't know. It's a very dry sarcasm. So that's how I took it. And I found it hilarious, but her delivery is so just, I don't know. It's interesting is the best way I can describe it.
So I was going to wait until script to bring this up, but I do, you're talking about it now. So I want to ask, it seems to me upon further rewatches that this movie is intentionally funny.
Oh yeah.
I don't think moments like that are accidental. On repeated watches, I'm like, this movie is a horror comedy. And it's not why can't I think of scary movie? It's not that kind of horror comedy, but there are so many hilarious lines in this movie that I was like, this can't be on accident. Can't be on accident.
Well, Barbara Crampton, like up in the air duct, freaking out, man. I just kind of like chuckled to myself a little bit like that. She was just freaking out, and I'm like, calm down, dude. It's just an air fan. Like, what are you doing? He needs me.
I definitely agree with you, Tim, because I think that, yeah, there are a lot of comedy moments. And like, if you ever listen or like watch an interview with Wynorski, he definitely has that like goofy, kind of creepy, kind of different type of sense of humor that he has, like, and also like Roger Corman type of humor. So like, there is that sense of humor in there. So I definitely agree with you on that. Something I really didn't think about until you brought it up, especially with that line. Because like, yeah, there's that, and then thank you, have a nice day. But it's just like, going back to the characters, there's just nothing really I can write home on. I think the only other note that I had was that it's just someone I had to bring up, but Dick Miller. I just love anytime Dick Miller gets a cameo in a movie. I love, one of my favorite movies is The Burbs. So like, just anytime I see Dick Miller, just like kind of like warms my heart, because he's just like a familiar face type thing.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just not a movie known for its characters, and like you're not watching the movie for, you don't want to know where their characters lead. You don't really care what they're going to do after this movie's done. So
you don't want a sequel with Ferdy and Linda?
No.
I agree. You said it best earlier that the main characters here are those robots. The Killbots are the main thing. The rest of them are your typical, and I hate saying it, but they're your typical slasher tropes. You have the good girl in Maroney's character. She's the final girl. She's the squeaky clean one through the film. But yeah, two pretty well-known scream queens with Barbara and Kelly, with Maroney and Night of the Comet, as you said. Crampton had been in Reanimator the year before this. Paul Bartel and Mary Warrenoff at the beginning reprised their roles as Paul and Mary Bland from Eating Raoul in 1982. So there's a little bit of a cameo there. But you mentioned Dick Miller. Just great little cameo, but there's not a character arc. There's not really like anybody to latch onto other than, you kind of like the main two. You kind of like them and you want to see them make it through, but also I'm kind of here for the Killbots because they're pretty awesome. So this is one that, this is an interesting movie because I feel like, as much as I love this movie, I got to be honest with you and say, I'm just going to give characters, it's a 3. It's good. None of it is so bad that I cringe and can't watch and like, oh, I hate that character. No, they're good. They all serve their purpose. I'm engrossed in the movie. I'm having a good time, but there's not like, you know what? Susie Lynn's arc in Chopping Mall is really one you need to see. Like that's not the conversation that's being had about this movie. So yeah, I'm a 3. I give it a good on the characters.
I agree with you on that. I'm sitting at a 3 as well. Susie, man, like her need to want to go after and help her dude, and then like end up getting just roasted. Like, damn, it's like, that's awesome. But yeah, sitting 3s.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with you guys too. It's just like 3. There's no one hateable, and they're just all kind of there, and I think that's a good thing.
I take it back. The cook, the guy with the cigarette in his mouth while he's preparing food. Yes. I think I kind of dislike that guy.
Yeah, he is kind of unlikable. That is true.
I like the guy sitting there feeding his face that which he says, this whale beaches here every day. Those are the moments that I'm like, this is comedy. This has got to be comedy. Can I go first for music and sound design? I want to talk about this.
Please.
Okay. I had to put this one here, my squeaky chair, because this is what the soundtrack reminds me of. Depeche Mode. So that
Interesting.
that Killbot theme, especially, much of the music in this, I don't want to say much, about 50% of the music in this movie is adequate, does its job. But the Killbot theme, the main theme for this film, is that industrial style techno that's coming in at the it made me think of old Depeche Mode stuff. And I'm like, yes, I love this. I love this sound because it is different than a lot of the other slasher movies that were coming out about this time. A lot of them kind of like that just ambient synth sound that we see in other movies, or that kind of string. I Friday the 13th theme is a ripoff of Psycho's theme, and I will die on that hill. But it's a string arrangement. And then that string arrangement through the 80s kind of turned into a synth version of that same thing because synths were cheap. But this one is pretty unique in a plethora of soundtracks like this. Watching this movie this time, I actually looked for it on vinyl, which Waxworks released it on vinyl, because I was like, this is good. I like this soundtrack a lot. It's electronic score composed by Chuck Sereno, who worked on a lot of his movies. Wynorski's movies. I think he worked with a lot of Corman films as well. So he's pretty well known in the low budget horror sci-fi area. Some people say it's reminiscent of Carpenter's work. I get that, but to me, it definitely reminded me more of Depeche Mode, especially if you get some of the Depeche Mode like B-sides without vocals. My wife, I was listening to it in the car, and she was like, "What is this Halloween music?" And I was like, "It's Depeche Mode." But like, that's what I hear on this movie. I love it. I also love the robot sound effects were created using various movie clips, including The War of the Worlds from 1953. Jim Wynorski himself did the voice of the robots. The sound and the music and sound design on this film is one of this film's that I think this film has multiple high points. Music and sound design is one of them for me. I truly love the sound of this film. I put this film on in the background today while I was cleaning just because I wanted to listen to it. I like to listen to this movie. So that's what I have to say about about that one.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree with you more. The soundtrack is phenomenal. I definitely agree with you on the Depeche Mode reference. Very similar there. I think the key word though you said is unique. Because I don't even think I can compare a movie that has something that's even remotely similar to this. And in a way, I think, again, it's like another thing that makes Chopping Mall good, in my opinion, is that it makes it so different that, like, yeah, you're still watching a horror movie, but it doesn't necessarily have the, like, all right, well, we're going to play we're going to play scary music to remind you that you're watching a scary movie. I don't think that's necessary in this movie. So yeah, soundtrack's great. The robot sounds are fantastic. I think my favorite thing is just the robots like moving around on the ground. Sound design wise, like just that, like the sound of like a little tank or like a little vacuum. I don't know what it is, but I think that sound is so just accurate. I don't know. I typically watch like most of my, like when I watch a movie, I watch it with headphones and was picking up on every little thing. And I'm like, I just love the like small hum that when they're going over like the carpet or just like the linoleum, like just the sound the robot was actually making when it was moving. I thought was great. So yeah, overall, I mean, if anything that, if someone's going to like nitpick this movie, I feel like this is one of the hardest parts for them to nitpick because
Mhm.
I mean, it's not flawless, but it's really tough to tear apart.
Mhm.
Right on.
And you brought, sorry, Jonathan,
For-
you brought that up. Like the sound design for the robots just moving is so good that I never questioned the sounds would be added later in post. Like I'm watching it thinking like, yeah, that's the sound a robot makes when it moves.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about that element of it, which means they did an excellent job.
So for me, like the music didn't really register for me. And that's kind of a good thing because that means it blended well, but it didn't really stand out in a way that made me, think of it in the terms that you guys did as far as like the Depeche Mode reference. For me, it was just there just as an accent, which
You
is
watch
fine.
it again and you'll get it.
I
You'll
was
be
gonna
like,
have to. I'm
yeah.
gonna have to. Now, I just said now I have to go back and be like, I'm gonna have to listen for those tones and be like, oh yeah, okay.
Yep.
But for me, it was definitely the sound design overall for anything for me in this category because all the explosions, the lasers, all the small things that you catch, it's like, oh man, that's really awesome. Like even when they're in the technician office and the guy is sitting there with his back to the robots and you hear the power up, the power down, and the little things, the little sliding open hatch for the darts that shoot out and all that stuff, just there's a lot of these little small things that just make sense and it fits so well that I think they did a great job with how they planned out that the sound design, the breaking of the glass and everything when the robots are going through it, when the lasers are cutting through the sheet metal for the doors to the storefronts, all these little things, man, it all went together really well. So that's all I can really say about it. But aside from that, score wise, I went with a 4 because primarily of the sound design on this one.
I think I'm changing mine after we talked about it.
Oh.
I was a 4. I think I'm gonna say it's a 5.
Do you, bro?
The music might not be the Jaws theme, but talking about the sound design of the robots and all the other effects in this film, absolutely. I love that element of this film specifically. I'm impressed with it every time I watch it.
I got to give it a 4. I'm close to giving it a 5, but yeah, I'm sticking with a 4 because like I feel like I gotta reserve my 5s for like a solid 5. But no 4 because like it's hard to compete with, and even like with what Jonathan did, like it's just little noises that they do, and I even forgot about when he's in the control room and the little hatch opens up, and it's very reminiscent of those, old school sci-fi movies from the 50s and 60s. It's just cool little callbacks.
Heck yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, then I guess from there, we just jump into editing and special effects. For this one, I like the way it was edited. I think it set the tone pretty well, especially in the chase throughout the mall, the robots coming after the humans, and the back and forth they had with those scenes and the way they played together. Special effects, though, it's the mid 80s. So, I mean, you can't really compare it to the effects we have today, but they're still kind of cool for the time. Like when Dick Miller gets electrocuted after the robot knocks over the bucket of whatever mess that was spilled on the floor. Seeing him get electrocuted and like the colors and the weird little effects, all that.
That water looked like melted milkshake. He needs to dump that out and start cleaning again.
It was pretty gnarly. It was gross on that, but there was a lot of good special effects throughout this film. There really were. As like Susie Slater's head when she gets zapped with the laser from the robot and it just explodes. I was like, dude, that is so rad. And it's weird though, because every time someone gets shot with a laser, it's like, ooh, okay, limp around. But when you get shot in the head though, big explosion, like a little crazy over the top, but whatever, it's fun factor. So why not? Right. But even with like the explosions, the fires, going back to Barbara Crampton, when she gets taken out by the robot, because she's got her little can of like whatever petroleum, gasoline, whatever stuff. And she ends up getting lit on fire by it, and watching her flail and burn and I thought that was really good on the effects on that. Aside from that though, there's just lots of other random little things, but those were like some of the biggest ones for me that I thought were cool.
Yeah.
Burn suits, burn suits, burn suits. I love me a good burn suit, and boy, this movie has one of the best. Yeah, so Barbara Crampton's character, when gosh, gets caught on fire when that gasoline tank hits her, and it's so wild because you go back and you watch it, and I was telling mentioned this to Tim, but I watched the Joe Bob version, was one of the most recent versions of Chopping Mall that I watched, and even he's like, he's on fire, or the stunt
Hmm.
performer is on fire for so long,
Oh yeah.
and you don't really like think about it. And, like Jonathan, I watched it last night too, so it was fresh in my mind. And I'm like watching it without the Joe Bob version, and I'm just like, wow, this stunt performer is on fire for a absurd amount of time.
Hmm.
And I guess too, an interesting thing that I learned was they actually cut it down because apparently it was longer, but
Oh.
they were in risk of getting an NC-17 rating
Hmm.
if they would have carried the burn suit longer. So I
Wow.
mean, again, like that seems wild.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the head explosion. I love a good head explosion. That was maybe one of the best ones. I think of that one and the Deadly Friend one. Um, and yeah, like I mean, everything else was fairly simple. The electrocution stuff, yeah, kind of fun, but still really silly. And then the lasers,
I love them.
you know, and here's kind of like, and this is something I was thinking about earlier. Like, I think, and I hate to say like if I produced this, but I just feel like one thing that maybe could have helped this movie is if they did maybe like a couple of lasers, and like maybe the one laser was the head explosion and then two other lasers. Because I feel like, yeah, they did too much with the lasers, and it doesn't look good to begin with.
Hmm.
So, and you mentioned it too, Jonathan. It's like even when they would hit people, it would like just graze them, but yeah, it hits her in the head, and her head just like pops open. So like logistically,
Lucky
yeah.
shot.
So I think, and those effects definitely costed some good change back in the day. So I'm just like, okay, well, limit the amount of times these lasers are being shown. So that again, that's where my brain's thinking, because that to me was like the weakest part of the special effects were those lasers. Um, so yeah, effects wise, I really like the effects besides the lasers. And then editing, oh my gosh, I actually really like the editing. I the runtime is like uh spoke to me.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I love short run times. I'm a dad, and I go to bed at 9 sometimes, and when I can get a short run time on a movie, boy, I love it. So, yeah, that 1 hour and 17-minute runtime or whatever it is fantastic. So,
Thank you.
being able to edit all of that together and into one little thing is a lot of fun. And then um one last thing that I'll note on the editing, and it's one thing that I was talking to a photographer friend of mine. So we both love when the opening titles don't appear until like 20 minutes into the movie. We're both like really it was just like a random conversation we just started having, like just out of the blue. We're like, you know, in this movie, how like the title credits don't show up until like 25 minutes into the movie. I'm like, I
Mhm.
love when movies do that. Um, so the title credits in this movie are another instance that I love, where a very like kind of like insane, like pretty sick line is said by an actor, and then it just cuts to the titles. This is a great example because they're like, what's the worst that could happen? Shopping mall. And it's just, I don't know, it's so 80s, it's so cheesy, but like just the delivery like gets you excited. It's like, All right, I'm about to watch probably the most ridiculous, over the top movie ever, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's just like, what's the worst that could happen? And then I don't know. So I just love that editing technique was really good. Again, it's very simple. It was just how they timed it, but they put that together very well. So editing is, I think, yeah, the editing was done very well. So
I'm I'm with you on that. I'm going so far. I'm leaning into the comedy aspect of this. Like that is comedic timing in the editing. That is what's the worst that can happen? Boom. This. And I often go back to UHF with Weird Al to talk about editing and comedic timing because that movie is so good at that. And that what you mentioned makes me think of that. And that's one of my other, like, in the list of reasons why I say this movie was meant to be funny. That's another one of them. Like, there we go. But I love the effects. I don't really have much more to add on top of what you guys said. The lasers, I love the lasers for a little bit of cheese factor. She said in that Joe Bob episode that the lasers were expensive. Like
I believe it.
Yeah, a lot of the budget went to those lasers, and I'm like, man, what could you have done if you had not done the lasers, done something a little different with it? But also with the special effects, those robots are awesome.
Yeah,
they are so cool, and it is cool in the nostalgic way. Like we mentioned the Tesla like human looking robot. We've seen that. We've seen the Will Smith iRobot movies. Like we've seen other robots since then, but those have that nostalgia factor of like, yeah, I kind of could see why somebody in 1985 was like, this is what's going to be patrolling the mall. Like, I get it. And the fact that they made it using RC car parts, random toy hand things, it's cool. It is an awesome little robot. I like, as we're talking about it, I want like a scaled one to sit on my shelf back here because it's a cool little piece of 80s movie nostalgia. I love it. Yeah, other than that, I'm glad you mentioned the editing, Travis. This movie is short. And apparently it was 25 minutes longer, and that got trimmed because I don't know what could have been in those 25 minutes, unless it was like, I can't imagine another character that got cut, so I can't imagine what else was in it. But apparently it was too dark, and they cut it, trimmed it, and honestly, I think the pace is fantastic.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I'm okay with the cut we got.
Yep. This is not one where I kind of want a director's cut just to watch it one time, see what's going on, see what I missed. But this cut is like a TV movie. It flies by. It is fantastic the way it is. There's no scene that I'm like, well, this is a waste of time. It moves at a brisk pace. We kind of have three main, I don't want to call them battles, but it's kind of three main battles that separate the story, and we just keep moving from one to the next, and I don't have a problem with it. So I'm at a 4 on the editing and special effects for this film.
I am sitting at the same. I'm hitting 4 on this one for sure. Because it was a little excessive with a lot of the laser shots, so if it wasn't for that, maybe I would have taken it up a little higher, but yeah, good. 4.
Yeah, 4 for me as well.
All right. The script is next.
Boy, howdy, the script. Man, like we were saying earlier, so many one-liners and like little jab moments of just goofy stuff. Man, like that fat guy who was in like the restaurant they're talking about there, where the whale guys, like right before they cut that scene onto the next part of the story, waitress, more butter. It's like, dude, get a grip. You got like all this crap in front of you. You want more butter? Chill out, man.
Yeah, he does.
And then Greg, he's, when they're earlier in their store and they're like, oh, fuck, it's Fuchsia Friday. Like, where's the fuchsia? The fuchsia. It's like, the hell with the fuchsia, man. Like, get real.
That line is so good. Fuck the fuchsia. It's Friday. I love alliteration. It's so good.
It's like, nobody gives a shit about this, dude. Like, whatever, man. We're about to go party with some ladies and get drunk and maybe knock some boots. Like, who cares about fuchsia, man? Like, whatever, dude. Just like a lot of weird little lines like that and goofy stuff. Like with Greg and Susie's like, he's all like, you smell like pepperoni. She's like, well, if that's how you feel. He's like, wait a minute. What? I like pepperoni. I'm like, yeah, all right, get that, bro. Smells like some meat you like. You want to get down with that lady? Okay, bro, go for it, man. But like I said, there's so much goofiness in the lines, and there's a lot to spread around. I thought it was cool, man. I enjoyed it. There's just so much goof in here.
Yeah.
The script. It's another like I respect type ordeal where it's like, they were proposed to, I don't know if Roger Corman came to him or if it was his wife. One of them came to him and was like, we'll give you a movie deal if you come up with an idea. And him and the writer got together at some restaurant or diner or whatever, and in 24 hours came up with a movie idea, and it was Chopping Mall, which, again, I'm sure, a much better idea probably could have came about, but I don't think I'm not too sad because we wouldn't have got Chopping Mall. So, as far as the script goes, I've never written a script, so it's like, I hate to be so judgmental, but like the script is, it's very cookie cutter. It's, very basic. It's, the lines are what they are. I don't know. I just don't think it's really the main focal point. So I guess I like really, it's one of the things as a part of this whole review that I really wasn't like focusing on per se, just because I'm kind of just like, well, it's kind of really not the main thing that really holds this movie together, even though obviously there wouldn't be a movie without it. But yeah, the script, it does stay in one place for the most part. It does go off a few times, but I think for the most part, it kind of stays on track. But yeah, it's a good script. I'll just kind of end on that. It's a good script.
You can be judgmental if you want. That's why we're here.
Yeah, no, it's a good script. I've read worse.
So this is where I always try to separate the story. I give the story the structure and how original it is. The script is just the lines that are said. The lines that are said. And this movie, this is where I'm going back to, this was intentionally funny. It was meant to be funny. And I gotta believe that when you get these lines that, I mean, you mentioned a bunch of them, Jonathan, you mentioned a bunch of them, the pepperoni, the waitress more butter, the fuchsia. One of the ones that I die at every time I see it is when the guys arm themselves and say, let's send these fuckers a Rambogram. I think it's so funny. I don't know how you write this and don't mean for it to be funny. I just think I also have a very weird sense of humor. I've said it on many other episodes that I don't find comedy movies funny, but I find this movie hilarious. What was the other one that I thought was just hilarious that we disagreed on pretty bad? I don't remember. It's fine. But like, I laughed harder at this than I did at Blues Brothers, which is our previous one. And that was a comedy, but like, this is this kind of stupid situational comedy that it gets me. It gets me. I really like the script on this, and I love the robot lines of just about every time they kill somebody. Thank you. Have a nice day. And roll away. It's just a punchline to every kill. It's so good. So I'm actually, for this, I criticized the story for not being super original. I gave it a 3. I'm actually going to give the script on this one a 4 because I think it's hilarious, and that is my personal. That is definitely personal. I think this movie is very funny. I love how funny this movie is. Like the fact that, like for example, Greg and Rick have just escaped robots. They're sitting there like catching their breath, planning their next step, and then Greg goes, "Hey, how much do I owe you for the beer?" Like that is your thought right now. That is where you are going, and I think that is comedic timing. I think that is so funny to be worried about that in that moment. That it is one of the things that I love about this film is I've seen plenty of slashers on Tubi where I'm like, ugh, that was bad. I'm watching this like I don't think this is bad. I think this was intentional. I think it's for fun. I think that is part of what makes this movie stand up 40 years later is that its script is it's well done. It's comedically timed. So I'm a 4 on it. I actually think the script on this movie is great.
That's all right to have that opinion. Me, I'm gonna go down a little lower with a 3. I almost went lower, but I was like, no, it did a good job. It still had good delivery. It was fun. 3's cool, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3 as well. I will jump back though real quick because like I do agree with the comedy. Some of the best comedy is anytime the characters talk to the robots, like talk directly to the robots. That's like, I don't know. To me, that's like when animals talk in movies is really like, again, it's kind of like what Tim said. It's like, it's a weird thing, weird humor.
Yeah.
And that's something that makes me laugh is like when animals talk in movies. So like in this movie, the thing that makes me laugh a lot is when they talk to the Killbots. And because the Killbots aren't going to respond, and if they do, it's not going to be like intelligent response. So, but otherwise, script, yeah, it's a 3. But I do agree with you, Tim. Though I do think that it was definitely wrote with the intent of humor. There's definitely an intent to make people laugh with it.
Yeah. All right. So on to the acting. This is a pretty thin one for me.
Boy, howdy. Yeah, you can't expect too much when it comes to acting in this film. It's like one of those like cheesy mid 80s date night horror film kind of things, just to go goof off with, you can't really expect too much. There's good people in it that have good work. But overall, it's just, oh my God, it's just so goofy, man, with some of this stuff. These characters, they're cool, they're fun, and you don't really get too attached to them. But I mean, it was decent delivery. But I don't know. I just really can't say much more about the acting than that. It was okay. It served its purpose for the most part. Other than that, though, I mean, Kelly Maroney was more like the highlight when it came to acting out of anybody, I think. The others were cool.
She kind of went from reserved goody two shoes nerd girl to badass pretty quickly. Like she could flip that switch.
Like with acting, like when you got Dick Miller, he's always been good at like some of those smaller parts, and he always plays them well. Actors like Paul Bartel and Mary Warnov, I've seen them paired up in so many things, and even though they're not main characters, they still have they still serve a good point, as far as with the character expression. Others, like a lot of the other people, I didn't really know who they were until now. With the exception also of Garrett Graham, the technician, the second technician guy. You never really see what happens to the first technician guy. You just know the bot comes up on him and then he disappears and no one's like, oh, where'd that guy go? When he shows up, like, oh, where's dude? But delivery was fine.
The second one with his nudie mags in the security room.
Yeah. It was nice with the ladies seeing some body. I thought that was cool. They were always had a good time. You could tell they were having fun bouncing around on the couch in the bed in there and they're doing whatever. But mostly it was like just that scene again in the air vent and how crazy Barbara Crampton was being, while Kelly Maroney is just like, dude, it's gonna be okay, just chill, kind of situation. And the other ladies were just kind of there, just kind of side notes. Didn't really give much as far as dialogue with anything else, but the acting was okay. And it's nothing really special to me.
Yeah, acting was, again, it was fine. I think the like side character, like the one-offs, the cameos almost, where those are the actors that like, if they were like in the lead roles, like the Dick Smiths and the Bartels, like if they were given a bigger role, then that's who we'd be talking about. And, our cast discussion would probably be a lot different than what it is now. But otherwise it was fine. And I also too think that like, it was definitely a director decision to, I think they knew Maroney was going to shine. And that's, why like her character actually had an arc. So they're like, okay, like we're going to cast Maroney in this role because this character actually does show an arc, does show like, that she's a badass essentially. And I think that's why, like, when you watch the movie, you're like, oh, I don't really care much for anyone else besides her. I think that's like very relevant. And then also too, like when you watch the Joe Bob version, she's like, oh yeah, he kind of had a crush on me. And like, I told him I didn't like him. And like, so I feel like the director, Wynorski was like, oh, if I like make her look like $100 million or whatever, maybe she'll go on a date with me. I mean, who knows, but still, I think, in the cast department, nothing too crazy.
Yeah. I don't have anything really to add. You guys said it. They delivered the lines well. That's it. There's no really standout performance that's amazing. So, I mean, I've definitely, absolutely seen worse. I didn't think any of it was bad. Travis earlier mentioned the delivery of that, like, I'm just not used to being chased around a mall in the middle of the night by killer robots, and how kind of flat that delivery is. But like, I can't count that against her, because I definitely think, like we've said, I think that's leaning towards that dry sarcasm, and she's doing that on purpose. And this movie has a couple moments of that kind of like dry sense of humor in the deliveries. And I think that was totally a choice from the director, and like, hey, let's do that. This is how I want it delivered. Like, get that humor in there. So I'm a 3. The performances were good. That's all I got on that one. The performances were good.
3 as well.
Yep, 3 as well on my end.
All right.
Ooh, trifecta.
So we got the last 3 categories. Direction, 2 real categories, and then 1 final category. So the direction for the film, Jim Wynorski.
As Tim knows, I'm never good at expressing myself in direction. I'd never know how to speak succinctly on this. So, I don't know. This is like the worst part. This is the worst category for me. It always is. I guess I liked the direction. Yeah, you go ahead. Okay. You can just take it over. I don't have much to say on direction. You guys have fun with it.
Okay. I like the direction on this movie. I don't think there's anything truly remarkable about the direction. I do like a lot of smart choices that were made. And they filmed in a real life mall. They couldn't destroy real mall property. So if you're watching with that in mind, you'll notice that like any scene where something is destroyed, the camera cuts in a little closer. We don't see wide, expansive hallways. We see what's probably a replica set, or just a little piece, a door that's rebuilt for them to destroy. And the tricks used there, super smart on the direction. I love that. There's no really, I come at the direction category as if I'm thinking, in terms of Hitchcock, where he really staged his scenes and used the camera, or even, why can't I think of Dario Argento really composed the way the film was shot. This movie doesn't have that composed idea for each image, but it's well done. You know, we've talked, it's an hour and 17 minutes. Mm-hmm. And to pull that off and to be cohesive and to be engaging, that takes talent, that takes skill. He does a great job pulling all of these elements together, taking a movie about killer robots in a mall overnight and making it wildly entertaining and some of the most fun I have watching these older movies. That is to the credit of the director. So I give that. I am a big fan of the way this movie opens. It's a bit, I don't want to say it's a slow burn, but it almost starts like a comedy, like a teen comedy more than anything else, because we get that opening montage, that fake out that I actually like. We get that presentation of the robots, but then we get into just this mall drama. Two waitresses working, you know, their clients. We get a montage of mall life in the 80s, and none of it feels out of place for me. It sets the scene. It builds the story more. It makes me enjoy it more. So I give the direction. I have a hard time saying it's great. I think it's a little better than good, because I think, yeah, I'll let someone else go now. So Travis, you can you can chime in.
Yeah, no, the directing's good. And I think he did a good job with the open. Like I think it would have been a lot different if the entire movie was in the desolate mall, like if everything took place at night, like after the mall was closed. But the fact that they did get all those scenes of, the skateboarding kid, like riding around the mall, the stuff on the escalators, just like showing that it is like a heavily active mall during its like working hours. It's small, but like I think that like adds value to that set piece, because it's like, oh, absolutely. Like this is like a hip happening place. Like it makes sense that like these robots are here or whatever. And then I think too, yeah, there's a lot of like directing choices that I like just from like an independent standpoint. Just because he does do a lot of smart choices. Like you said, a lot of cutaways. The cutaways are so smart. Like, yeah, you're not going to blow up an actual mall. So I think, little things like that are smart. And then in terms of like directing the actors, I don't know. I mean, I think that's maybe where some points would be taken away, because I don't think that there was much of that going on. And I don't mean that in like a bad way, but like, I just don't think that was happening. Like, I just think that the actors were reading the lines from the script, and he was saying action and maybe doing a couple of takes and then saying cut and then going on to the next scene. And the reason I think that is they wanted to get the movie done and made and sold, but also too, they were under some time constraints because they had to be up and out and cleaned up before the mall opened. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't think there was a lot of direction in terms of like directing the cast. So that's kind of my feedback on the directing of it.
Brado?
Yeah. So you're good, Jonathan.
Yeah, you guys covered it. So you spoke about it way better than I could, by far.
So the last thing I have to say, he included a lot of nods to other horror and sci-fi films. There are posters. We have that scene in Attack of the Crab Monsters. We have posters of the Forbidden World in the background. And a lot of those are Corman references, which actually, according to Joe Bob, Corman was not a fan of, but Corman didn't like nods to his own work in his movies, which I guess that makes sense. But there's that one scene where they're hiding, crouched down against a wall, and there's movie posters on the wall, and those movie posters are Corman films. And that stood out to me. I was like, this Jim Wynorski was definitely a fan of Corman. He definitely studied Corman, and I appreciate that. But yeah, I'm a 3 on the direction.
Same.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I'm torn between 2 and 3. Um, I don't know. I had it in my notes and you
You
brought it
can do
up.
2
So
now.
now this is why I gotta like bump it up to a 3 because you mentioned it. Cause I'm like, oh shoot, he did put this in the movie. So yeah, I would say a 2, but because you mentioned the posters, I gotta bump it back up to a 3 because in my notes I wrote down the fact that there's a Saturday the 14th poster and that there's a Screwballs poster in the movie. So the fact that he included those in a movie, um, pretty
I
damn
watched
cool. So,
Screwballs for the first time about 3 months ago.
what are your thoughts?
That movie was wild, and I had a great time watching that movie. That was one of those that I had no idea what I was getting into, and I was purely entertained.
Have you seen Porky's before?
Oh, I love
A
Porky's.
long time
Porky's
ago.
and Porky's
Long
2.
time ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you should rewatch Porky's and yeah, like Jonathan said, you should watch Porky's 2 as well. The next Porky's 2 the next day.
Yeah. So now
Yeah.
my Tubi feed is filled with those like 70s, 80s sex comedies now.
Sex comedies.
Yeah.
Oh dude, some of them are so
They're
good
fantastic.
too. Like yeah, Ski School, Hot Dog the movie,
I saw Hot Dog the movie.
Summer Resort. Dude, there's so many
Yep.
good ones, and when
You
you
know,
find a good one, they're good. Like so, yeah.
Yep. They're
Our
wildly
feeds look very
entertaining.
similar.
Yep. All right. So we gave our scores. Cultural impact.
So yeah, I don't feel like there's really much cultural impact with this. I mean, we did see kind of a rise in more robot movie action, like more robot themed stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff even before this movie came out that was robot themed, but the quality of it came up a little bit as we get more into the 80s, like with films like Short Circuit 2, where you had like a more interactive robot with comedy and some other stuff going on. I just don't feel like this film, I know it's considered a cult classic, but I had never heard of this movie until it was on our list. I had no clue about it. So it is cool and all, but I just don't feel like there's much significance in it. That's just me though. I don't know.
Cultural impact. So I think the impact that it had, I mean, I think as filmmakers, it's just had an impact on just like how to make a low budget movie in a mall. Like, I mean, not just a mall, but like using, like again, like the fact that he was able to film this entire movie over during nights in a mall, like a very popular, like, like you said earlier, like Commando shot here, and granted, Commando shot during like working hours, but it's still wild that like a Shindy movie filmed in the same exact mall as that film is quite the feat in itself. So, not necessarily a cultural impact, but a big kind of like, okay, like if this guy did it, we can do it. There's a way around things. You just got to figure out like, okay, I maybe can't film my movie during the day at this mall, but maybe I can work with them like after hours, or maybe I can film in one of the stores, or maybe like I just think that is there. But I think really the biggest cultural impact, and I don't know if it's from this movie, so this could be wishful thinking, which it probably is I think that this movie, and especially now because it's like regained popularity with like the re-releases and stuff, is the use of its marketing foolery, I guess if you want to call it that way, is like you spend, and I wish I knew the exact number on what they spent on the marketing, like the poster design and everything, but that is what sold this movie. Like I feel like the majority of people I know that have seen this movie don't like it. Like they can't stand it. They say it sucks.
Wow.
But they said what pulled him in was the poster.
Mhm.
And I mean, I totally agree. Like when I first saw it, the thing that pulled me in was the poster. So I think, and that's what sold it to video stores. Like that's why video stores probably bought this movie back in the day, was because of that poster. So I think, and this works even in today's day and age, like filmmakers and distributors see like little gimmicks like that and they're like, oh, well, that worked for this filmmaker. Like, let's try this and see if it works with our movie. So I do think there might be something that could be cultural impact-ish from Chopping Mall that, maybe a distributor, because Corman is a god when it comes to independent filmmaking. I mean, the guy is, rest in peace. The guy is unmatched when it comes to stuff like any of Corman books. Like, oh my gosh, if you want to be a filmmaker, read his books. He's genius.
He's a legend.
Yeah, legendary. Yeah. But I think that, so many people took from Corman, and obviously, Wynorski did too, but I think people were definitely paying attention to like the success of Chopping Mall, and they're seeing like, well, people are mad because the poster has nothing to do with the movie, but yet it's making so much money. Like, I just think that like knowing distributors, they definitely like were taking that like, okay, like maybe our movie's not the greatest, but like, let's make sure we make a really cool poster. And if you look at horror movies, and you've brought up Tubi, like if you're on Tubi, there are some garbage films on Tubi, but man, do they have some cool posters. Like if you pay, and you can pay like $500 to have someone make you a cool poster. Like, and that's the thing, like to me, it's like, I can literally watch a movie and be like, and I try to be transparent, and because my movies aren't the greatest, but like I'll be like, hey, if your movie sucks and you're not happy with it, like give it a really cool poster, get really cool marketing ideas for it, and like present it like that. So I do think that could be a cultural impact this movie has. Otherwise, I'm going to start digging too deep, and I'll stop. I'll start speaking incoherently because, like, that's as far as I can go, unfortunately, guys. But I think that's the only cultural impact that I can justify. So,
I am with you. The cultural impact for me mostly comes from the poster. It's so good. It's so good. I love the poster. That's all I gotta say. And most of the times, if I bring this movie up, it is people who are frustrated that the poster doesn't match the movie. And unlike them, I happen to love the film behind the poster as much as I love the poster, even if out there I'm going, what would a Chopping Mall movie actually look like? So, and you mentioned some others that kind of have that similar idea, but this is one that outside of the horror world, outside of the indie movie world, not many people know of. I first heard of this watching the In Search of Darkness documentaries, and they brought up the poster. The poster doesn't match the movie. That's how they introduced it. So I kind of knew that getting into it. But I do think that documentary and recent, I don't know, the Blu-ray release from Vestron Video, I picked up a copy on over Christmas time because I love this film. I think it's bringing back that kind of cult status years later. People are discovering this movie, and it's such a wonderful little bit of nostalgia from the mall. Brain farting on that word, the mall life of the 80s, just the obsession everybody had with malls at that time, from the mall culture, that's the word, mall culture of the 80s to it is kind of like taking those campers from Friday the 13th, but it's not a summer camp, it's a shopping mall, and we put them there and watch, and there's something about that glossy sheen of the shopping mall that I'm there for it. I want to watch this. I like one of my other weird feeds on Instagram is abandoned malls because there's part of me that just like my heart breaks seeing it. There's a word for, I don't remember it. Every time there's a place that's highly populated and then you see it empty.
Oh yeah,
And
it's a fear.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I have that. It used to happen every summer at summer camp. My dad ran a summer camp, and on the last day, everybody would start to leave, and we would always be the last ones to leave the camp. And that day was always so hard. And so there's something about abandoned malls that it's that same idea of like in the 80s, they were thriving, and now we see them and it's just empty.
Well,
And
you say that, Tim. It's like back in Northwest burbs of Chicago, where we were at, down in St. Charles, the Charlestown Mall. They tore that down last year. It is gone and done. And that place was huge. That was a huge mall. But you go there because the movie theater was still operating, and you would walk through, and all the other storefronts empty, nothing, nobody except the movie theater. And then most recently, the Spring Hill Mall in West Dundee, Illinois, they are tearing all that down. I think they're going to leave the movie theater, but the rest of that, that's a pretty big mall too. And they're tearing it all down. That's starting to happen a lot of places with these abandoned malls. And it's like places that used to be huge cultural meeting centers for people are now gone by the wayside and are being torn down. Luckily, Woodfield Mall in Schaumburg, Illinois, is still thriving in a busy hub. Yeah. But all the rest of the places you get further out into the burbs from the city of Chicago, it's all faltering and falling apart, man. It's sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Where we live in Indiana, the town closest to us has the second biggest mall in Indiana, and it's almost empty every time we go. Like it's crazy. But yeah, so because of those things, that snapshot into the 80s mall culture, and its resurgence, I got to give it a 3 on culture impact. It's not huge. I don't see enough. I don't see enough people talking about this movie. I think more people need to see this movie, and I think they need to know what they're getting into because this movie is a ton of fun. But yeah, 3 for me on cultural impact.
I was sitting at a 2. Yeah.
I'm going to say a 3.
All right. So then we close this out with our how entertained were we? So this is the normal what other people review movies as. How entertained were you? 0 to 10.
For me, man, I was entertained a fair bit. I enjoyed the cheese of it all. It was pretty cool. I always enjoy a good cheesy movie with goofy bullshit going on, and of course, love seeing some nice female bodies. That always makes me happy. But other than that, as far as the culmination of everything, how it's put together and the way they presented it was still great. For me, I put it at a 7.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at like a pretty like solid. Oh gosh, I'm at a solid 9. I mean, I think I say a 9 because I showed it to my wife, and it was like sometimes it's like with slashers and stuff like that, it can be a crapshoot because she likes horror movies, but Chopping Mall, it's an obscure one, it's a deep cut, and you never know when you're going to show anyone Chopping Mall that like what kind of reaction they're going to give you. And she had a blast, and it's like when you watch it with someone that also is loving it, it just makes it so much more fun. And yeah, and with that runtime, yeah, it's a 9.
All right. So this is where I might surprise you. Travis, I always say a 10 is I would turn around and watch it immediately. That's the difference between a 9 and a 10 for me. 9 is absolutely love it, but don't want to watch it right now. I will put this movie on again as soon as I finish it because it has a world I want to live in, as well as just purely entertaining to watch. So I mentioned I think it's funny. I think some of it's honestly rewatching it. It's not as gory as I thought it was the first time I watched it. It's very tame, actually, but the comedy gets me every time. I think it's funnier on repeated watches. I love the soundtrack. I'll just sit there and immerse myself in the soundtrack. And it's got enough of like this. The characters aren't super memorable, but it's got enough of that character drama between the different relationships and the work environments and whatever. I'm there for it. So, and I think the first half of the movie is different enough from the last half that if I start it again, I don't feel like I'm just immersed in the same thing the whole time. So I'm actually a 10 on my entertainment. Like, this movie entertains the crap out of me. I will watch this anytime somebody mentions it. That's why when you shared it on social media, I was like, oh, there we go. We got to talk about this movie. I got to watch it again because I love this film. I truly do. So I'm a 10 on that, which means we are at our final where we do what our name suggests and we average the scores of our total viewing experience to get what it might represent for our crowd, what it might represent for a social gathering.
Okay.
So my total is a 38, which would be rounded to 4 stars out of 5, but 38.
Mine is a 32.
And then Travis, did you see yours there?
Yes, mine is a 37.
So 32, you said, Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
All right, 32. And that would get us at, that is wrong.
Damn math. Numbers.
It said the average was 82. That's not right. 32, 38, and 37. Average is 36. So 3.5 stars is where that would sit as our average, which is the idea of the average is that it is your guide to social gatherings. So 3.5 stars if you're having a group over. 3.5 stars tells you, you know, it might not be a home run, but most people are probably going to be entertained by this film. I think
that's a fair assessment.
Yep. I think a social gathering actually might improve the watching of this film. I think some of the comedy might hit a little better. I think it'd be fun. I kind of want to test it out on a social gathering. I just don't know people, so that's not going to happen. But yeah, that's where we are at on this one. Let me see here. Travis, do you have any other final thoughts about this film, about yourself? Anything you would like to share before we close out?
I mean, I just love this movie. I mean, again, it's just like, obviously just from like a fan standpoint, it's just like such a fun movie to watch. I also think too, and it's like, I think what's really fun about stuff like this is you always get recommended, and this is more so for like individuals. Like when I talk to my students, and you know, sometimes I'll throw out movie recommendations for them to watch, to like learn about. You know, hey, this is a good movie if you want to make a movie like this, or you know, again, this might sound silly, but like Shopping Mall is kind of one that I would recommend just because like you take a certain amount of a budget, less than $1 million, and look how it was spread out. And there's still a lot of ways that it could have been spread out even further, and it could have been even better probably. So I do think that, yeah, Chopping Mall is a great representation. Such a fun sentence to say out loud. Something I never thought I would say, but it's a fun representation of just, you know, a good movie. And like I said earlier, like to me, a good movie is something that you can rewatch. And Chopping Mall is definitely something you can rewatch. So yeah, I'm glad that I was able to come on and talk about Chopping Mall. I love 80s horror movies. I mean, I did a podcast probably a year or so ago where I talked like 2.5 hours on the 1987 movie Slaughterhouse. Like
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I love horror movies.
Yep.
You know, it's fun to make movies and to work on movies, but deep down it's like I would rather, if I could do a podcast or just talk, you know, if I could be like the Joe Rogan of horror podcasts and just make millions of dollars talking about horror movies every day, like, oh my gosh, that would be like the dream. Because that's the root of everything. It's like I love movies above all. Like
Yep.
making movies, producing movies, marketing movies, all fun. Absolutely love it. But it's all about talking about movies and watching movies. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And then I guess last but not least, promotion wise, yeah, have a couple movies coming out. Going to be working on one soon, found footage movie. And then Forbidden Sky, which is a UFO alien movie, kind of similar to, if anyone listening or any of you guys familiar with Art Bell, kind of similar to that style. Radio show host gets a call from another world. We've got Daniel Platzman from Imagine Dragons is going to do the score for the movie. He's actually already like sent stuff for the movie, and the movie's not even in pre-production yet. So
that is awesome.
that's like, yeah, and it's the sound, like as far as like pre-production goes, we've like made prosthetics and props, but like, yeah, he's like actually sent us like score tests, and we're just like, this is fucking mind blowing that this is you're already doing this and it already sounds amazing. So yeah, he's doing that. But yeah, we're working with a lot of just like the usual suspects, people that we already, know and love. So yeah, Forbidden Sky is going to be a lot of fun. And then besides that, yeah, I want to put over my school, Futures Explored. They're a film school in Sacramento for adults with varying disabilities. So definitely support them. They've got a lot of cool short films online. And I did a feature length found footage movie with them called The Grove. And it's on Tubi. And if you watch it on Tubi, all of the proceeds from those views go right back into the school. So
Awesome.
that's my last little part of my pitch. But yeah, no, regardless, thank you guys for letting me come on and talk about Chopping Mall. Never thought this day would come. A boy's dreams do come true. You always, you made a boy's dream come true.
Absolutely. We had a great time having you. You're welcome to join and talk about any other movie you think of.
Oh my gosh, guys, real quick. I can't believe, Tim, we didn't say this. Tim, I want you to be the one to announce this. Tell Jonathan what today officially is.
Oh, yeah. How did we forget that we are recording this on what anniversary is it? 40?
So
40th?
I'm going to be 37 next week. So yeah, 38th. I was born in 88.
Okay.
So yeah, 38th, I think.
So it's the 38th anniversary of the movie's release.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Came out on March 20th, 1987.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the timing is perfect. I love that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Travis. Where can people find you? Where can they find your movies? What's the best place for people to go find more?
You can find me. I primarily use Instagram. I'm on Facebook and other stuff, but primarily Instagram, Travis_Ayers, Ayers. You can download all my movies on LimeWire or Kazaa or Napster. I'm just kidding. You probably can, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure you can find Cyst on all those. My movie, most of them are on Amazon Prime, Tubi. Some of them, like Infrared and Christmas Tapes, they're on Tubi, but they also are through our distributor on their YouTube channels, so you can watch them there. Some of them are on DVDs and Blu-rays. We do have with Tales from the Crypt rentals and Retro VHS. We have Cyst and Christmas Tapes are both on VHS. So there are limited releases of those movies still available, I believe, on VHS. And I don't know if I can't make any promises, and I don't know if anyone would even want this. But it was a cool promotional thing we did. With one of the Cyst VHSs, you could actually get a combo where you would get a Cyst big box VHS, and alongside of it, you would get a hot sauce bottle of Cyst pus. That was actual hot sauce. So I don't know if those are still available because they were like limited. They only sold a certain amount, but Yeah, at the time when it first came out, you could get the big box version with a hot sauce.
That is
So yeah,
disgusting and fantastic.
yeah,
I love it.
but yeah,
So good.
everything is out there. And then, like I said, the school futuresexplored.org, and yeah, that's really it. I always like to recommend a movie, but like I'm literally drawing a blank on stuff. The last movie I watched was The Video Dead, and I'm not going to recommend that because it wasn't.
You recommend Chopping Mall to anyone?
Yeah, I recommended
There you
Chopping
go.
Mall. Chopping Mall was a good enough recommendation. So yeah, thanks again, guys.
Yeah, thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Glad to have
And
you.
that is Chopping Mall, a perfect mix of 80s excess killer robots and a shopping mall death trap that only the Reagan era could deliver. It may not have set the box office on fire back in 86, but it found its true audience on VHS, late night cable, and horror nerds like us who can't resist a good dose of campy, over the top fun.
Absolutely. With its blend of slasher tropes, sci-fi horror, and that unmistakable B-movie charm, Shopping Malls has cemented itself as a cult classic. It's the kind of film that reminds us why we love horror, not just for the scares, but for the creativity, the absurdity, and let's be honest, the spectacularly cheesy one-liners.
If you haven't seen it yet, grab some popcorn, turn down the lights, and prepare for a night of laser blasting robots and shopping mall carnage. It's streaming on Tubi. It's on Peacock. There's a Blu-ray version of it on Amazon for less than $30, and it's worth every penny. And if you have seen it, well, I think it's time for a rewatch.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Average Reviews podcast. Make sure to follow, rate, and let us know what you think about Shopping Mall. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And remember,
this is The Average, where the real review happens with your friends. See you next time.